All right, let's dive deep into Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. You know, this book has guided so many people towards success, but what exactly makes it tick?
Well, Think and Grow Rich, it's more than just your average self-help book. It's kind of like a detective story. Hill was actually given a mission by Andrew Carnegie, the steel tycoon, to figure out, you know, decode the secret to success.
Right, we're talking about the Carnegie secret.
Mhm.
Carnegie spent decades proving this formula really worked before he even asked Hill to share it. And get this, Hill actually reveals the secret a bunch of times throughout the book, but he never actually, names it.
Yeah, it's actually pretty clever. It makes the reader actually, think about it and engage with the material and really internalize those principles. And speaking of principles, one of the most important ones is what Hill calls burning desire.
Right, this isn't just wishing or hoping.
Right.
It's more like an intense, all-consuming drive to reach your goals.
Exactly.
And Hill does a great job of illustrating this with the story of Edwin Barnes. He had this burning desire to work with Edison, not just for him.
And that's a really important distinction. Barnes knew exactly what he wanted.
And that's what fueled his persistence.
It did. He even slept in Edison's office until he got a chance.
Imagine that kind of commitment. Barnes really understood the power of a definite desire. It wasn't just some vague wish, it was laser focused.
Exactly. And Hill really hammers home this idea of being specific. Throughout the book, he talks about the importance of knowing what you want and then focusing your energy on achieving it.
It's interesting how that idea connects with another story that Hill shares, the story of Darby, who almost struck it rich in a gold mine, but he gave up just 3 feet from the vein.
Oh, can you imagine the
I
frustration?
know, but he actually witnessed something that totally changed his perspective.
He did. A young black girl, just through sheer willpower,
Yeah.
managed to kind of master her adult white uncle. It was a small thing, but it really impacted Darby.
It was like a light bulb moment for him. Darby realized that he'd given up too easily in that gold mine, that he didn't have the persistence needed to actually succeed. And he took that lesson into his insurance sales career. He changed his mindset and actually ended up achieving incredible success.
That's really fascinating about Darby's story. It wasn't just about working harder. It was about changing his self-talk. He stopped viewing setbacks as failures and started seeing them as opportunities for growth.
So let me ask you this. When you come up against challenges or setbacks, how can you change your thinking about those setbacks to actually propel your future successes?
That's a great question. I think it's all about understanding that power of your mind to get past those obstacles and keep that persistence.
Right. And speaking of the power of the mind, Hill takes us on a really interesting exploration of imagination. In particular, what he calls synthetic imagination and creative imagination. Now, I have to admit, when I first read this, I was a little confused about what the difference between the two was.
It can be a little tricky.
But Hill uses a great example to explain it, the story of Henry Ford.
Oh, Ford is a great example because he defied so many limitations. Despite not having much formal education, he still had this huge vision. His famous quote, "Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right," really captures that belief.
Right. And his vision to mass produce cars was really revolutionary. But it wasn't just a dream, was it? He took existing ideas and technologies and combined them in new ways, which is a perfect example of synthetic imagination.
Absolutely. And at the same time, he was envisioning a future where cars were available to everyone, which was totally new at the time. And that's where creative imagination comes in. It's the ability to come up with something completely new, something that goes beyond what already exists.
So how can we cultivate both kinds of imagination in our own lives?
That's a great question. I think it's about being open to new ideas, combining what we already know in new ways, and daring to dream big, to envision possibilities that might not even exist yet.
I like that, to think big. Now, Hill also challenges a pretty common idea, the idea that knowledge is power.
Right.
He argues that knowledge is only potential power
Exactly.
until it's organized and applied.
And he gives a great example of this. A man who lost his job during a really tough time. Instead of giving up, he saw a need in the market for wholesale bookkeeping.
So he didn't just sit around feeling sorry for himself.
He didn't. He took action. He acquired the specific knowledge he needed to fill that gap and then created a plan to market those services.
So he didn't just have the knowledge, he actually used it.
Exactly.
And that's a great reminder for all of us. We need to be strategic about the knowledge we go after. It's not enough to just have a lot of information. We need to think about what we want to achieve and what specific knowledge will help us get there.
Couldn't agree more. And that leads us to a concept that's central to success: the mastermind principle. Hill argues that no great fortune is made alone.
It's about working together, right?
It is. It's about harnessing the power of several minds working together toward a common goal.
And he uses Henry Ford again as an example, pointing out his inner circle of really brilliant minds: Edison, Burbank, Firestone, and Burroughs.
A real powerhouse group.
Ford knew he needed their expertise and collaboration to make his vision a reality.
Think about it, even with all of Ford's ideas and drive, he wouldn't have achieved the same level of success without his mastermind group.
So it's a good reminder for us that we don't have to go it alone. Collaboration and mentorship can actually amplify our strengths and help us achieve more than we ever could individually.
It's true. And now, for a topic that you might not expect in a book about success, Hill actually talks about transmuting sexual energy into creative energy.
I remember that part. Now, before anyone gets the wrong idea, Hill's not saying to suppress desire.
Right.
It's about understanding the power of that drive and channeling it in a constructive way.
Throughout history, there's a definite connection between a strong sex drive and achievement. Think about the energy, the passion, the focus that often comes with romantic pursuits.
It's about channeling those powerful emotions, focusing that energy into building something great, whether it's a business or a work of art or anything else you're passionate about.
Exactly. It's really fascinating to see how our internal drives can actually fuel creativity.
Mm.
And this leads us to another crucial part of Hill's thinking: conquering fear.
Right. He identifies 6 basic fears that can hold us back: the fear of poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love, old age, and death.
And he doesn't just list them out, he actually gives us ways to overcome each one. He talks about the power of making a decision and then taking action.
That's so important. So take a moment and think about it. Which of these fears might be holding you back right now, and what can you do to face them head on and move forward?
That's a great question for everyone to consider, because, as Hill argues, overcoming fear is essential to achieving any kind of success.
And that brings us to the amazing power of the subconscious mind. Hill believes this is the real key to reaching our full potential. He introduces something called autosuggestion. Basically, it's repeating affirmations to reprogram our subconscious minds.
It's like planting seeds. If you're always thinking negative thoughts, those are the thoughts that will grow. But if you can plant seeds of belief and courage and possibility, you can change your mindset to actually support your goals.
So it's about being mindful of the thoughts we're feeding ourselves.
Exactly. The subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between good and bad thoughts. It just works with whatever we give it.
So we need to be intentional about creating a positive internal dialogue.
Couldn't agree more. It's all about taking control of our thoughts and beliefs and using them to create the life we want. So let's dig a little deeper into this auto-suggestion thing and how we can actually use it.
Yeah.
Hill actually gives us this detailed self-confidence formula in the book. It's basically a set of affirmations that are supposed to build up your belief in yourself.
And he's very clear that this isn't some kind of mystical practice. He calls it a law of nature, something psychologists call autosuggestion.
Right, exactly.
But what I find so interesting is how he connects this to achieving actual material success.
Yeah, because Hill argues that the subconscious mind doesn't care whether a thought is good or bad. It just acts on whatever thoughts we feed it most often. So if we're constantly bombarding ourselves with negativity and self-doubt, that's what our subconscious is going to manifest in our lives.
It's almost like our subconscious mind is this incredibly powerful but also kind of naive force. It just takes whatever we give it and runs with it.
And that's why it's so important to be mindful of those thoughts, to make sure we're feeding it the right stuff.
Right, because if we're not careful, it can actually work against us.
It can. And Hill gives this really chilling example. This bank official named Joseph Grant made a mistake and lost a bunch of money. And instead of facing the consequences, he let fear completely consume him. He kept repeating, "My God, this will kill me," over and over.
Oh, wow.
And tragically, he died shortly after. The doctors actually said it was mental suicide.
It's a stark reminder of just how powerful our thoughts can be, both for good and bad.
It really is. And it emphasizes how important it is to choose our thoughts carefully.
It's almost like we have this responsibility to curate our thoughts, to be mindful of the stories we're telling ourselves.
I like that, to curate our thoughts.
And this brings us to another important concept in Think and Grow Rich: faith. Hill describes it as the eternal elixir.
That's a powerful image.
It is, right? He says faith gives life, power, and action to our thoughts. And it's interesting how he connects faith, something we usually associate with religion, to actually achieving riches, and not just money, but spiritual, mental, and emotional wealth as well.
It's a fascinating connection, and he gives us tons of examples to back it up. He talks about the power of faith in Christianity, how it's the foundation of this huge global force.
hmm
And he also points out the incredible things people have achieved throughout history, through their unwavering belief in themselves and their visions.
One of the most compelling stories he tells is about Charles M. Schwab, this
Yeah.
young steel executive who had this incredible ability to inspire faith in others.
Oh yeah, Schwab was a force of nature.
He was. Hill describes this fancy dinner party in New York, where Schwab was introduced to some of the most powerful financiers in the country, including the legendary J.P. Morgan.
Wow, what a room to be in.
I know. Schwab was told to keep his remarks brief, but he was so passionate about the future of the steel industry that he ended up captivating the room for hours.
He must have been a really engaging speaker.
He was, and the result was incredible. Morgan, who was initially skeptical, was completely won over by Schwab's enthusiasm and his bold plan.
That's amazing.
It really is. This encounter led to the formation of the United States Steel Corporation, a billion-dollar giant that transformed the entire industry. It's mind-blowing to think that one conversation, fueled by this unwavering belief, could have such a huge impact.
It really shows you the persuasive power of faith.
Yeah.
Schwab not only believed in his vision, but he made other people believe in it too. He inspired them to take action and create something truly extraordinary.
So where does this kind of faith come from?
Well, Hill argues that it comes from autosuggestion, from repeating our beliefs over and over again. It's about training our minds to see what we want as a possibility, even as a certainty, before it actually happens.
So it's about shifting our perspective from, I hope this happens, to, I know this will happen.
Exactly. And Hill gives us some very specific techniques for developing that kind of unshakable faith. He talks about focusing on the exact amount of money you want, visualizing it with your eyes closed until you can see it clearly in your mind, and repeating this exercise every day, mixing it with faith, and seeing yourself already in possession of that wealth.
It's about creating that mental picture of success.
Exactly.
Hill also emphasizes the importance of specialized knowledge, but he makes it clear that knowledge alone isn't enough.
Right. It needs to be organized and applied.
And he's pretty critical of traditional education systems for not teaching students how to actually use the knowledge they acquire.
He contrasts this with real-world examples of successful people, like Thomas Edison, who only had 3 months of formal schooling, but became one of the most prolific inventors in history.
And Henry Ford, who barely finished 6th grade, but revolutionized the automobile industry.
Exactly. Both of these men achieved incredible things, not because they were just smart, but because they knew how to use their knowledge in practical and innovative ways.
It's about being a problem solver, not just a walking encyclopedia.
Exactly. And Hill argues that this kind of specialized knowledge is readily available, often at a very low cost. He encourages us to figure out what knowledge we're missing, to research specific fields, and to take advantage of resources like night schools and correspondence courses.
It's about being strategic and filling those knowledge gaps in a way that actually serves our goals.
Exactly.
And this is where Hill gets really tactical. He gives us a step-by-step guide for creating a plan to market our personal services.
And it's interesting that he focuses on personal services, because he argues that most big fortunes start with someone selling their skills or ideas.
It makes sense when you think about it. Before you can build a company or amass a fortune, you need to develop valuable skills and offer them to the world.
Right. You have to start somewhere.
And Hill breaks this process down into 8 key steps, starting with figuring out what specific knowledge you need, and ending with creating a compelling presentation that showcases your experience and qualifications.
It's a really practical approach to building a personal brand and marketing yourself.
He even suggests offering to work for free for a while, just to prove your worth and get your foot in the door.
It's about showing potential employers that you're a valuable asset.
And that you're serious about making a contribution.
It's interesting, too, because Hill actually recognized a shift happening in the relationship between employers and employees.
What do you mean?
Well, he predicted this move away from the traditional boss-worker dynamic towards something more like a partnership, where both sides are invested in each other's success.
So more of a collaborative approach.
Yeah.
And he talks about the golden rule replacing the rule of gold, emphasizing cooperation, fairness, and mutual benefit in the workplace.
He even says that both employers and employees are ultimately employed by the public they serve.
It's a really interesting perspective. It highlights the idea that success isn't just about personal gain. It's about creating value for others and contributing to society as a whole.
And that leads us to another important topic, leadership.
Right. Hill outlines 8 key qualities of successful leaders, including self-control, a strong sense of justice, decisiveness, and, interestingly enough, a pleasing personality.
He really believed in leading by example, doing more than what's expected of you, and fostering a spirit of cooperation and understanding.
He also recognized that the world was changing and that the old leadership by force model was becoming outdated.
It's fascinating how he was writing about this almost a century ago, and his observations are even more relevant today.
So true.
He predicted that future leaders would need to be more collaborative, to lead with mutual respect and shared goals in mind.
Which makes a lot of sense in today's world.
It does. This kind of leadership is essential for innovation and creativity, and for creating a shared sense of purpose.
And now, for the flip side of success, Hill actually dives into the causes of failure.
Oh yeah, the stuff we don't like to talk about.
It's easy to skim over these parts of the book
Huh.
because we're so focused on what we need to do to succeed.
Right, but understanding what not to do is just as important.
Exactly.
And Hill starts with this really blunt truth. He says an unfavorable hereditary background, while a huge obstacle, is the only cause of failure that can't be easily fixed.
Meaning we can overcome pretty much anything else.
Exactly, with the right mindset and strategies.
It's a really empowering message. It suggests that we're not limited by our circumstances.
We have the power to shape our own destinies.
And after addressing that one unavoidable obstacle, Hill outlines 29 other causes of failure, including things like not having a clear purpose, procrastination, lack of persistence, and negative personality traits.
He really goes into detail about each one, offering practical solutions and insights.
And it's not just a list of problems. He also gives us 28 questions for self-analysis.
Those are really valuable.
They are. They make us think critically about our own habits and beliefs and help us identify our weaknesses so we can improve.
It's like taking a personal inventory, a
Exactly.
deep dive into our own minds to see what's holding us back.
And Hill doesn't shy away from tough topics like poverty.
Right.
He's very clear that there's no compromise between poverty and riches.
He argues that poverty isn't just a lack of money, it's a state of mind.
That's a powerful idea.
It is. He suggests that the fear of poverty is really deep-seated in us. It's like a leftover from our primal instincts for survival.
So our relationship with money goes way back.
It does. And Hill goes on to describe the symptoms of a poverty consciousness, the habits and behaviors that actually attract poverty rather than riches.
Like what?
Things like indecision, doubt, worry, overcaution, procrastination, and lack of enthusiasm.
So it's not just about what we do, it's about how we think. And he shares a really powerful passage from a manuscript written by someone who experienced poverty firsthand.
Oh, I remember that.
It's heartbreaking. This man describes the crushing weight of financial hardship, the feeling of inferiority that comes with it, and the toll it takes on your mental and emotional well-being.
It's a powerful reminder of the devastating impact poverty can have
on every aspect of our lives.
It's not just about material things, it affects our whole sense of self.
Exactly.
And then Hill shifts gears to a topic that was pretty controversial at the time: sex.
I was wondering when we'd get to that.
He argues that the desire for sexual expression is the most powerful human emotion.
Wow.
And that when we harness it and transmute it, it can become a driving force for creativity and achievement.
It's important to remember the historical context here. Hill's views on sex were influenced by the norms of his time.
Of course.
But what's interesting is that he saw this connection between this primal drive and our potential for success.
He did. And to be clear, he's not talking about just indulging in those desires. It's about understanding their power and channeling them into something positive. He uses historical examples like Napoleon, who was known for both his military genius and his passionate love affairs.
That's a bold claim.
It is, but it shows you how Hill believed that our physical, emotional, and mental selves are all connected.
Right, that we're not just separate compartments.
Exactly, we're integrated wholes.
Yeah.
And when we can harness all of those forces in a constructive way, we can achieve amazing things.
It's about recognizing our full potential as human beings.
I like that.
And that leads us to another crucial concept: persistence. Hill calls it the sustained effort necessary to induce faith. And he argues that it's the key to overcoming obstacles and achieving our goals.
It's about not giving up, even when things get tough.
Exactly.
And Hill doesn't just tell us to be persistent, he gives us a framework for developing it,
He breaks it down into 8 factors.
including definiteness of purpose, self-reliance, accurate knowledge, cooperation, willpower, and the power of habit.
So it's not just about brute force effort, it's about cultivating the mental and emotional resilience we need to stay the course.
And he gives us inspiring stories of people who achieved success through persistence. Like Darby, the insurance salesman who faced countless rejections but never gave up. And Henry Ford, who overcame so many setbacks to build his empire.
It's a good reminder that the path to success is rarely easy,
It's usually messy and full of obstacles.
but it's those who persist who ultimately achieve their goals.
And Hill uses this great analogy. He compares life to a boxing match.
I like that.
He says, we're all going to get knocked down at some point, but it's our willingness to get back up that really matters.
It's about resilience.
Exactly.
And then Hill talks about the importance of controlling our thoughts.
Our minds are like gardens that need constant tending.
It's a great analogy.
We need to be careful about what we plant in our minds, weeding out the negative thoughts and beliefs, and nurturing the positive ones.
And he gives us practical tips for doing that, like using affirmations, visualization, and focusing on our goals,
It's about taking control of our mental landscape.
rather than letting our thoughts run wild.
Exactly.
He also stresses the importance of surrounding ourselves with positive people and minimizing contact with those who drain our energy.
He uses another great metaphor here. He describes our minds as radio receivers that are constantly picking up signals from the world around us.
So we need to be selective about which stations we tune into.
Exactly. Choose the ones that broadcast positive and empowering messages.
And this brings us back to where we started, the Carnegie secret.
Yes.
Hell never tells us exactly what it is, but he drops hints throughout the book, and he wants us to figure it out for ourselves.
It's a clever way to make us think critically and apply the principles.
So what is this secret?
Well, it's not some magic formula or a get-rich-quick scheme.
It's more about a set of principles, beliefs, and habits that, when applied consistently, can lead to extraordinary results.
Exactly. It's about believing in yourself, having a burning desire to achieve, having the courage to act, the persistence to overcome obstacles, and the willingness to tap into the power of your subconscious mind.
It's about understanding that we are the creators of our own destinies.
I like that.
We have the power to create the lives we truly want.
And that our thoughts are things. They have the power to shape our reality.
So Think and Grow Rich is more than just a self-help book. It's a philosophy.
A way of life.
It's a call to action.
To step into our full potential
To overcome our fears.
and create a world of abundance and prosperity.
As we wrap up this section of our deep dive, we encourage you to go back and reread the book, to dig deeper into the principles, and to uncover the Carnegie secret for yourself.
The wisdom in this book is truly timeless
It has the power to help you achieve your dreams, live a life full of purpose.
and make a real difference in the world.
Now let's move on to another fascinating aspect of Think and Grow Rich, the concept of the sixth sense.
The mysterious sixth sense.
It's interesting how Hill connects this concept
Something we usually associate with intuition and extrasensory perception.
to the realm of success and achievement.
It is. He argues that most people never really tap into their sixth sense.
They might use it accidentally or not at all.
Exactly. But those who consciously cultivate it, they're the ones who achieve greatness, the true geniuses of our time.
So it's like this untapped potential that we all have.
It is, and Hill makes a distinction between synthetic imagination, which relies on our existing knowledge and experiences.
So combining what we already know in new ways.
Right. And creative imagination,
Yeah.
which taps into a higher source of inspiration and insight.
So creative imagination is about receiving completely new ideas.
Almost like downloads from somewhere else.
Exactly. And Hill argues that this is what allows us to break through limitations.
And achieve true breakthroughs in our chosen fields.
And he gives us some really compelling examples.
Like Henry Ford, who envisioned mass production of cars, even though we didn't have a lot of resources or experience at the time.
And Dr. Elmer Gates, this prolific inventor who had over 200 patents.
Dr. Gates was fascinating. He actually made a living by sitting for ideas.
Sitting for ideas.
He would charge corporations huge fees to tap into his creative genius and solve their problems.
So he was like a professional idea generator.
Exactly. And Hill describes his process in detail. He would isolate himself in a dark, soundproof room with all these scientific instruments to measure his brain activity.
Ah.
And then he would focus his mind on a specific problem. and let his creative imagination come up with solutions.
It's a really methodical approach to creativity.
It is, and it highlights the importance of practice and creating the right environment.
So it's about setting the stage for our minds to flourish.
Exactly, to quiet the noise of the outside world and tap into that inner wellspring of creativity.
And Hill encourages us to experiment with different methods.
Things like brainstorming, meditation, and exposing ourselves to new experiences and perspectives.
It's about being open to inspiration.
And trusting our intuition. Those flashes of insight that come from our
And
subconscious.
aha moments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he says we need to embrace those moments,
Mm.
capture them in writing, and explore their potential. Because they might be the seeds of something truly great.
It's about recognizing that inspiration is all around us.
We just need to be receptive to it.
Capture it and cultivate it. It's fascinating how Hill connects creative imagination to something like sex drive.
Right.
He actually argues that highly creative people often have a strong sex drive, suggesting there's a link between these two powerful forces.
Yeah, it's not about indulging in those desires, though. It's more about the idea of transmutation, channeling that raw energy and passion into something creative, into building something that really matters.
And he uses examples like Napoleon, who is known for his military genius, but also for his passionate love affairs,
Right.
to illustrate this point. It's a pretty bold claim, but it fits with Hill's belief that our physical, emotional, and mental selves are all interconnected.
Absolutely. We're not just compartmentalized beings. We're integrated wholes. Our drives, our emotions, our thoughts, they all influence each other. And when we can harness all of that in a positive way, it's incredible what we can achieve.
That's a great point, and this brings us to another crucial concept: persistence.
Ah, yes, the key to it all.
Hill calls it the sustained effort necessary to induce faith, arguing that it's essential for overcoming obstacles and ultimately achieving our goals.
And he doesn't just tell us to be persistent. He actually breaks it down into actionable steps.
Right. He identifies 8 factors that contribute to persistence, like definiteness of purpose, self-reliance, accurate knowledge, cooperation, willpower, and the power of habit.
It's a really comprehensive approach. He's giving us a framework for building that mental and emotional resilience, the kind we need to keep going even when things get tough.
And he doesn't just talk about it in theory. He gives us inspiring stories of people who succeeded because of their persistence.
Like Darby, the insurance salesman, who faced rejection after rejection, but just wouldn't give up.
And, of course, there's Henry Ford, who overcame so many obstacles to build his automotive empire.
Those stories are so important because they remind us that the path to success is rarely straightforward.
It's more like a winding road with lots of bumps along the way.
Exactly. And Hill actually uses this great analogy. He compares life to a boxing match.
Oh, I like that one.
He says we're all bound to get knocked down at some point, but it's how quickly we get back up that really shows our strength,
That resilience is so important.
especially in today's world.
Absolutely. And then Hill talks about controlling our thoughts.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Our minds are like gardens, remember?
They need constant tending.
We have to be mindful of the seeds we're planting, pulling out the weeds of negative thoughts and beliefs, and nurturing the positive ones,
And he gives us practical advice for doing that.
using affirmations, visualization, really focusing on our goals,
It's about actively shaping our mental landscape.
instead of letting our thoughts just run wild. And he reminds us that we have the power to choose our thoughts. And by doing that, we have the power to shape our realities.
Create the lives we want.
That's the key.
And it's not just about our own thoughts. Hill also talks about the importance of our environment, surrounding ourselves with positive people, and limiting contact with those who bring us down.
He uses this brilliant metaphor of the mind as a radio receiver.
Picking up signals from the world around us.
Right, so we need to be careful about which stations we're tuning into. Choose the ones that are broadcasting uplifting and empowering messages.
That's such a great way to think about it. And it brings us back to the beginning, to the Carnegie secret.
That elusive secret.
Hill never explicitly reveals it, but he leaves clues throughout the book. He wants us to discover it for ourselves.
Which makes us really think about the principles and how they all fit together.
So what is the secret? It's not some magic formula or a shortcut to riches.
It's more of a combination of principles, beliefs, and habits. That, when applied consistently, can lead to amazing results.
It's about believing in yourself,
Having that burning desire
the courage to act, the persistence to keep going.
and the willingness to tap into the power of your subconscious mind.
It's about realizing that we're not just passengers on this journey. We're the drivers.
We have the power to create the lives we want.
And our thoughts are incredibly powerful.
They can shape our reality.
So Think and Grow Rich is so much more than just a self-help book. It's a philosophy, a way of looking at the world,
It's a call to action, an invitation to step into our full potential
to overcome our fears and create a life of abundance and meaning.
for ourselves and for the world around us.
And as we wrap up this deep dive into Think and Grow Rich, we encourage you to revisit the book, to explore these ideas further, and to uncover the Carnegie secret for yourself.
It's a journey worth taking.
And remember, the power to create your reality lies within you.
Choose your thoughts wisely
Act with courage and conviction.
and never give up on your dreams.
Until next time, keep thinking, keep growing, and keep diving deep.